we are excited to have you here. Funding for this symposium was made possible through CU Boulder's Impact Grant, the Office of Access and Community Engagement in the College of Arts and Sciences, CU Libraries, and Be Well. My name is Adele Labrador-Ronen. I'm a member of the symposium's planning community. I am a white person with blue eyes. The hair you can see is brown, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck. Before we introduce today's speaker or panelist, I would like to remind everyone to please take this moment to mute themselves during the presentation, and that closed captioning is available by clicking the CC button. Please do feel free to use the chat or your reaction emojis during the presentation to interact with one another. We will be using the last 10 to 15 minutes of this hour together for questions, during which time you are free to raise your hand or use the chat.
Okay, I guess that's my cue. So today we are going to be, sorry, pulling this up. Yeah, thank you for joining us. The name of this presentation is Accommodations in Athletics, How Educational Flexibility for Student Athletes Can Benefit All Students by Jared Browsh. Which now it is my pleasure, so a little bit of background for this talk. So this presentation highlights the high prevalence of ADHD among student athletes and the unique pressures they face balancing athletics, academics, and personal responsibility. It explores how instructors can better support student athletes and all students with outside commitments or learning differences through universal design for learning UDL strategies. These include flexible assignments, varied ways to demonstrate learning, adaptive deadlines, effective communication, and technology use. By leveraging lessons from supporting student athletes, this session offers practical approaches to create more inclusive and adaptable classrooms for all learners. Okay, now so a little bit more about our presenter. Jared Browsh is an assistant teaching professor and director for the Critical Sports Studies program in the Department of Ethnic Studies. Dr. Browsh is a cultural historian, commentator, and author, examining the political economics of sports and popular culture, including the relationship between culture, money, power, and identity in the United States and globally. Dr. Browsh's recent work has examined the whitewashing of sports history, along with the social impact of legalized sports gambling. Their upcoming publications include a book on the impact of legalized sports gambling in the United States and projects examining the use of animation in sports marketing and the history of basketball clubs as a source of ethnic identity and community. With that, I will turn it over to our presenter.
Sorry, just 1 second. I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not showing what is on. Let's do it this way. Oh, that's why. Okay. I just got to add permissions for Zoom and then okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, so just was sorry. I just got my computer back from Apple Care and didn't realize they reset all my settings. And so oops, to the corner. And so just to give a little bit of background on myself, we did the bio already, but I am a former Division I athlete. Um, I played JV, but did the whole suit up for the last game of senior year. And so I did get my letter, but I was traveling with the team throughout the season. I've been an administrator within athletics, a journalist, a sports journalist, coach, tutor. And then my background is in communication and sports studies. I like to refer to myself as neurospicy in terms of just my own experience. I wasn't diagnosed until my 30s. And so it's still part of this is also with my experience looking back at the lack of support and using that to motivate my own support for all students. And then I am an insufferable Philly fan. And so last week was especially traumatizing. We don't talk about last Thursday, but within that, I've been involved in athletics my entire life. And so like not only athletes, but as I'll talk about all kind of student populations, I struggled. I worked full time. I played a sport. And I had to balance school and other responsibilities, including taking care of family members. And actually, I transferred after my freshman year to move close to home to do so. And then knowing that there are a number of not only student athletes, but student in general who have to balance those responsibilities. And then in college, both playing and working, I noticed, especially since because I was playing, but also was a manager, I often was responsible for going to, before we had kind of different forms of check-in, I would be a proxy for the coaches in terms of ensuring student athletes were attending class. But I also noticed both in terms of my own experience handing in travel letters and accommodation letters, and the experience of student athletes, that many professors were not only resistant, but could be outwardly, I don't want to say hostile, but annoyed at having to accommodate students traveling and having to accommodate their needs as students. And there's, again, I deal with, in talking to student athletes, many of them deal with skepticism that they need the learning accommodations they get. Now, this is not exclusive to student athletes. I'll deal with students that are literally in the middle of being diagnosed, that they're going through the testing to get diagnosed with ADHD or other learning accommodations, and they'll get pushback from saying, either I currently have it or I am being diagnosed as we go through class. I'm always happy to be flexible, but often I'll hear, can you help with, can I get an extension because these other classes are not providing the accommodations I need? And then I also recommend they talk to the accessibility office, because obviously we know the legal implications of that. And then also there's a lack of knowledge in terms of how intense student athlete schedules have become, and also the general schedules of students as they look toward not only being achieving academic success, but also working other jobs and their other responsibilities on and off campus. And so just to give you an idea of a sample, and this is just a daily schedule, that if you notice, many student athletes are going from 5 a.m. till midnight, and are working on very little sleep, are balancing, again, all of these responsibilities. And it's often thought of that they go to class, go to practice, and that's it. they have workouts, they have film study, they have strength and conditioning, they have often rehab if they're recovering from an injury. They're required to go to academic support. And so often 16 hours or more of their day is packed. And what's not coming out of this is other responsibilities that, if you notice, and we know from football and basketball and other sports, our student athletes have NAL responsibilities, that we're in an era now that players are finally getting compensated for their time, and for the use of their image and likeness. But ultimately, that means that they need to do a social media experience where they might have to go to a restaurant or go to another um, 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 another organization, and they have to do it for social media because that's part of the NIL deal. They're also required to do donor and alumni events as a part of their work. And so this includes, especially when they're traveling, going to the local group, local alumni group, to meet, not only to kind of as a show of appreciation, but there's clearly a level of soliciting donations as a result of that. They have to still go to office hours if they need support from the professors. They have family that they need to communicate with. They need to either spend time virtually or in person. They deserve time to socialize often. And this is where we get in some of these bubbles where the socialization is often within the um, athletic facilities. But a part of that too is, especially on a campus like ours that is primarily white, they also deserve, especially with the disproportionate amount of players of color or students of color within the athletic program, they also deserve time to socialize with others that understand their experiences outside of just athletics. And this is something, as a tutor, I often spent significant time talking to student athletes that a number of them were from DC or from New York. I myself am from Philly. And so understanding that this is also a culture shock, and being able to deal psychologically with that includes finding support systems. And it's not always easy in an environment like Boulder to do so. They're also looking forward. Many of us have heard that commercial. 98% of student athletes go on to do something other than becoming professional in their sport. And so they need time to do networking, to internship, or to at least do career outreach to prepare for their next steps. And then within this, travel. And we've seen travel time expand exponentially with realignment and the increase in tournaments and other travel that used to be regional, but now, for example, the Big 12 goes from Utah to Florida. And so a trip to Orlando to play University of Central Florida is going to take multiple days and hours of travel that often takes them out of their routine, and often will conflict with deadlines. And so the fact that these schedules, these experiences are so visible that it can serve an example to advocate for all students. The fact that many students are balancing work, extracurricular, family, other responsibilities when it comes to not just class, but looking forward to their post-graduation life. And so in balancing all of this, and understanding the visibility of what athletes go through, because we see them, for example, with the football team, we see them every Saturday playing. And so we know where they are, but ultimately having understanding how packed their schedule is, and using that as a template will serve all students because they're not alone in having so much of their time scheduled out for them as they try to make the most out of their college experience. And so looking at UDL, that one of the things, and looking at an organization and like the National Education Association, it's about front loading. It's about being prepared as much as possible for different learning styles, different time responsibilities, and also, and part of the reason why I like to use student athletes as a template is because they do receive both academic and accessibility support, and it's within their facility, and so it's easier to access to at least kind of in considering the physical space, but it also can be a template. As I'll talk about in a minute, because student athletes have a higher average GPA, clearly those support systems have worked as that academic support has been increased over the last several decades. That can be a template for all students to both look at what support's available and then in this case, designing courses for different schedules, different backgrounds, and different learning styles. And so just a little bit of quick background on UDL, that it was really born out of architecture, that looking at universal design in planning and designing new buildings will ensure that a space is accessible for everyone. And so you're not going back and retrofitting, adding ramps, adding door handles at different levels, not having over sensory in certain spaces, as we've seen universal design be better about addressing those who have sensory issues, especially those, myself included, related to autism and related to ADHD and other experiences within the neurodiverse umbrella. And so by taking in consideration all experiences the best we can. Now, obviously, as I'll talk about in a minute, things come up in students' lives that we have to maneuver and you have to be flexible about. But ultimately, if we look ahead, and in designing courses and designing lessons, we can consider as many experiences as possible. It allows for the course to be accessible for everyone and lead to less retrofitting later and having to do different deadlines and for different students and things like that. Now, again, some flexibility is always needs to be built in because life happens, but ultimately this can save not only a lot of time, but a lot of students, as my experience speaks to, have not been diagnosed yet, don't know yet that they need certain supports, especially as they expand beyond the high school curriculum into different courses and different instructor styles and things like that. As instructors, if we understand that students are coming with different backgrounds, different skill sets, and different educational experiences before they get here, that can allow for students to not be as panicked or feel as isolated if we're offering UDL on the onset and not retrofitting later on. Now, this does include more planning, but it does save time later, as we know from course planning, when we don't have to redo work or juggle so many individual experiences because we've done that universal design work earlier on. And then again, along with their schedules, athletes have been shown to have high rates of learning difficulties. The prevalence of ADHD is actually double amongst elite athletes as compared with the general population. Some of this has to do with access to doctors and doctors being willing, and not only doctors, but specialists as well. We've seen a great uptick in psychological and mental health professionals within sporting organizations. And so that has led to, again, more diagnosis and more support. But there is some evidence too that those with ADHD are more drawn to sports because of the stimulation. And I was also kind of playing around with the slides, that the slides have this little notch in there. So I figured I'd flip the Jumpman sign to make him seem like he's dunking, but also the fact that Michael Jordan had been diagnosed later in his life with ADHD and has talked about that in relation to both using it. Because again, many of these, we look at these as difficulties, but there are superpowers contained within ADHD, within autism, that without my ability to hyperfixate, as a researcher, it would be much harder or take more time for me to do certain projects. And so I do see it as a power because it got me to where I am as a teacher and academic. But at the same time, it does allow me to also look back at my student experience and kind of want to fill those gaps in terms of ensuring that all students feel supported, and all students feel included in the educational experience. And so, as I said, the support has increased greatly. I said it before about student athletes have higher GPAs. This, again, part of this is the greater accountability to keep student athletes eligible, but also understanding the criticism that has come over decades on athletic departments not focusing on that first word of student, and pushing for more academic and mental health support. And so the fact that we have evidence that having learning specialists and having required study time and having that direct support overseeing student athletes works, and that can be evidence that that opportunity and those support systems should be forwarded to the larger student population because we have that direct evidence of those outcomes. And then there's still pushback. Again, one, there's kind of a consistent resentment over just the amount of money spent on athletics. And not to say that criticism is valid, but that's not the fault of student athletes. And even just I'll use the word annoyance over just the disproportionate visibility of athletics is valid, but again, should not be projected onto student athletes. That so many of the student athletes I have the pleasure working with, and again, I have a little bit of, I have a greater than average student athlete population in my courses because they are sport focused and they are focusing on their experiences as athletes, particularly as an ethnic studies professor, athletes of color, and being an advocate for greater access to sports for everyone, including the incredible growth of women's sports, as well as the continued growth of men's sports. That resentment is often, as I said before, projected onto athletes, and often we see less of kind of trying to make an example of student athletes, but there is some level of, either pushback or lack of flexibility and accommodation for student athlete schedules, even those the many student athletes that don't have necessarily learning accommodations. That's why we have travel letters. That's why student athletes are consistently recommended to talk to professors, to hand that letter in early, to talk about their schedules and reach out when the travel and when the conflicts do come up, that professors can work with the student athletes, but often a lack of communication, a lack of response, and even again, that hesitancy to provide that support within their extremely busy schedules is something student athletes deal with, but again, is also something that many within the general student population deal with, but they feel even less supported because they don't necessarily have an academic support person to also reach out and say, no, he is really traveling. Can you be flexible? Or I can proctor the exam while they're on the road, et cetera, et cetera. And so, again, this understanding and this willingness to work with students who have different things going on can again be beneficial for the entire population. And so again, school is an important part of life. But again, to afford school, and I was right there with them, and school costs have only doubled since I was an undergrad, that working is not just something students do to build a resume, it's a necessity to afford rent and food and even the tuition itself. But also they deserve to have a full college experience. Some of that is with socialization. Some of that is with clubs, whether it's affinity clubs or clubs that speak to the cultural or ethnic background of the students. Others are based on interest. Um, um, like clubs that focus on art, or clubs that focus on scientific pursuits, or even clubs that are built around cultural experiences like music or film, that these are not only beneficial for their socialization, but beneficial in them taking leadership positions, to plan events, and other skills that will also transfer to their professional careers. And so kind of within that that little bit of board game I have on the left, we see again, this is just the basics, that many of them are on academic clubs or teams, that have competitions like robotics or debate. And there's also clubs that are focused on, and myself both overseeing the radio station and now volunteering for it, that it's both professional experience, but also creative and social experiences as well. But they also need to take internships to gain that experience and network. Many of them do community service. And so they're working with their community I know I have a number of students that will coach or referee youth soccer. And so that's another, not only responsibility, but that's a public service they're providing as well. And then they'll also do maybe write articles for the school newspaper, or even if they're not in Division I sports, they might be playing club sports. We have a great club sports system here. And so those are all part of the college experience, and honestly what they're paying for. And so they deserve the opportunity to do so, but it does fill their schedule. And so not to say that they're working for the radio station should overtake academics necessarily, but understanding they're trying to balance within a 4-year period, wanting to get this full experience, meet people, network, and have opportunities that they might not have in high school. And we need to be understanding about that and support that. Now, it doesn't mean that they can necessarily forget school, but a little bit of flexibility, especially as they're balancing the responsibilities that will keep them in school with supporting their family, working part-time, if not full-time, which I have a number of students doing so, especially students that are coming back to college. I have a couple students that were in the military and now are back in college. I have other students that took a gap year or took some time off because they needed to work before coming here or even go to community college. And so they're trying to get everything in 2 years after graduating from Front Range or a number of other schools, that we need to, again, be understanding about the variety of different populations that make our community here at CU. And so, again, as we're looking at strategies, it's about building in flexibility and building in different approaches about coming away with the necessary skills and information from the class and thinking about for example, if I'm teaching a class on the history of television, I had one student come up to me about their first paper that's due next week and saying, can I do a podcast as a part of this? And I was like, that's great, as long as you're talking about the biographical essay. So as long as you're talking about the figure, I still need kind of a short write-up just to describe it, much like you would see on a SoundCloud or on a Spotify. But again, and also to make sure it's transcribed. And we have, I offer a number of tools, but I always put in, if you have alternative ways to communicate you've learned what you need to learn from the class, then I'm open to different formats in which you display that. And part of this too is technology. That technology now opens new opportunities to leverage UDL. And so when constructing a class, and this was after a few years ago, getting a credential in UDL, that I learned that offering multimodal ways to engage with the material. So sometimes, so I'll have a topic like we were talking about a couple weeks ago, Jackie Robinson. And so not just offering academic articles, but popular press and show shorter articles, videos, podcasts, and not only that, but offering them in different formats as well. That that if I'm offering a podcast, I make sure there's a transcript involved, so people, myself included, I don't always orally hear things when it comes to information. I have to read it. Some are the opposite, and so offering different ways to engage with information has gone a long way for students to engage in the course itself. And so again, part of this is prioritizing what you need students to get out of a course. That obviously, if you're writing, if you're teaching a writing intensive course, there's going to be less flexibility because you need to ensure those writing lessons are forwarded, but maybe flexibility on topics, flexibility on how they build out their writing, and the different ways that the writing skills can be communicated in those different modes. Again, as someone who's taught writing intensive courses, have gone a long way, that seeing they might struggle with even things like formatting in MLA or APA. And I noticed some students respond really well to like to Purdue OWL, where other students are better about viewing it on YouTube tutorials. And so just little things like that I've noticed have created less questions and less gaps in knowledge because different students will engage with materials in different ways. And so as we look at this, one is also, and again, I will admit I have an advantage because teaching sports and pop culture, students often come in with a general interest in those topics. But I was I'm teaching a course on African Americans in television, and some students. I was gonna kind of just talk a little bit about Star Trek in class, but I had some students that are huge fans of Star Trek, so I increased the conversation around that. Another one, I'm teaching a class on sports and social justice, and students were really interested in engaging with one, the controversy around Bad Bunny, and also around the incident at the BYU game a couple weeks ago. And so with that knowledge, I moved things around a little bit and engaged with those interests, but also brought in lessons and longer term lessons, or sorry, longer term history in terms of how we look at those events. Because, for example, looking at sport and social justice, BYU has struggled with some of their fans saying racially insensitive things to opponents. And so there's a longer history there that we can engage with. We go even deeper, where going even back to the 60s, Bob Beamon refused to participate in a meet in Utah for similar reasons 60 years ago. And so this is where, again, they were interested in one thing. And so let's expand, look at the history, and still make it relevant to class. Also cultural relevant as well, that it still is, as someone from the East Coast, from Philly. I've been in Colorado now for 10 years. It's still a little bit of a culture shock that people communicate differently. There's a higher level of passive aggressiveness, where I'm used to in Philly it's aggressive aggressiveness or active aggressiveness. But I had to navigate, especially as someone who struggles sometimes with social cues, be better at recognizing some of that as well. But also cultural relevance and understanding. We have a ton of international students. We have a ton of students from different racial, ethnic, and regional backgrounds, and that impacts not just their approach to the material, but what information they've gotten in high school. And so that's another area as well in terms of understanding that students are coming into classes with different levels of knowledge, that many of them, this is their first ethnic studies class that they're taking with me. And so offering alternatives and flexibility goes a long way, but also understanding, having empathy and building that trust with students so they say, I'm not quite connecting with this sport or this portion of history, we didn't learn it. Can we expand a little bit on that without feeling shame that their states and school districts are educating students very differently across not only the United States, but globally. And I have a student in one class who's from Hong Kong, and she was talking to another student, and they had very different experiences with world history. And so kind of even within that, I saw even within their interaction, how their educations were very different. And so again, understanding students have different learning needs. I talked about educational backgrounds, even attention spans. And this is where I've been better about kind of not being quicker about changing, not kind of we'll have a topic for the class, but changing kind of how the videos, showing shorter videos, um, um, uh, if, advancing across topics, to make sure that students are engaged, because their attention span is 2 or 3 minutes, and I need to kind of navigate that within class. And then language abilities is another big one as well, both in terms of writing and speaking, but also, again, understanding we have a wide range of international students as well. And then again, I started talking about international students. And so this can be a template for all students to continue, or as all students take on more, the outward and visible experience of student athletes can serve as that template. And so again, each discipline is different, but some strategies that I've noticed across different topics and different subject matters is humanize yourself, make it more comfortable. Now, it doesn't mean you're necessarily altering the dynamic in class as teacher and student, but I'm noticing, especially a few weeks in the class, students are more comfortable emailing me, talking to me after class. And so building that trust, especially those first few weeks, is huge in terms of better understanding what they're going through and what they need. One of the things I'm clear on, I reward attendance, but I don't necessarily punish absence. That students, and when I say reward, I mean I'll spend more time with students that are attending. Not to say that I ever cast off any student, but understanding that if a student's attending every class and they're struggling with balancing responsibilities, they can email me and say, can I have flexibility? Whereas if a student's not attending, I say, I need to have a face-to-face conversation with you just to be able to build it. So I'm not, again, I'm being cognizant of students attending, but not taking away points, especially knowing that students will get sick, they're traveling for things, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, students are rewarded for coming to class, but don't put too much pressure on every single absence. Now, if you're absent an entire half of a semester, I'll reach out and we need to figure out some things and talk about whether other things are going on. But also with rewarding attendance, making sure that if a student hasn't attended for a while, don't be like, you're at risk to fail, be like, what's going on? Are you okay? How's everything going? I've talked about formats and then deadline flexibility when appropriate, especially with communication, highlighting when assignment deadlines are coming up, highlighting when papers are due, because then they're more likely to reach out and say, I'm looking ahead, I have 3 papers due this day, what do you recommend I navigate that with? And then I know we're at about 15 minutes, and so I put this up too in case people want me to share slides. But even looking at UDL, again, multiple forms of engagement, understanding the different backgrounds and representation within a class, and then different ways to communicate what they've learned, different ways to communicate, as well as I'll talk about in a second, to students, because students will absorb information in different formats. And so, again, I'm someone, as I talked about, give me verbal instructions and it's in one ear and out the other. Show me what I need to do, or put it in text so I can read it. Others are the opposite. And so utilizing technology to offer it information in different formats, flexibility and assessment, as I said, understanding a little bit of flexibility in attendance and deadlines, especially knowing students are doing different things. And again, student athletes are very forward with their travel, but other students are traveling for conferences, for family matters, things like that. And so having some built-in flexibility with deadlines can go a long way to save yourself time to not have to individualize deadlines or submissions as a result of different responsibilities or different and unexpected issues within the semester. A lot of students have some say within the class to follow interest or to engage with related interests within a class, communicate clearly and efficiently, but also multimodally. That I often will email students, I'll post it on Canvas. Sometimes if it's something longer or something I need to go over in terms of assignment, I'll record a video or an audio version of it as well, just to, again, as many ways as possible, have students absorb information. Remembering students are human, things come up. Even just a little bit of understanding can mean the world. And honestly, that understanding has led to students take multiple classes with me, ask me to be advisor or lead honors thesis or dissertations. And so that trust is never forgotten and can lead to really incredible outcomes in their education. And then one of the things that often students don't know what they don't know. They don't know writing centers, library support. They don't know even that CAPS exists. And so even just having those resources in the syllabus or knowing what exists to tell students can go a long way to them finding that extra support that's often automatically available to student athletes, but takes some level of self-motivation to do so for the rest of the student population. And so again, the strength in academic support, recognizing their busy schedules and everything that student athletes are balancing, is a starting point for educators to engage with UDL, and also front load, construct classes rather than retrofitting classes for the different learning different learning styles, different needs, and different backgrounds for all students.
Thank you so much, Jared.